Vectoring in forward flight had two main advantages, being an increase in pitch rate and instantaneous G due to downward thrust. Here we can observe almost zero increase in pitch rate over various nozzle angles and throttle applications. I will talk about this a bit later. I set a 5-second window starting at full deployment of the braking stop nozzle angle, this being nozzles as far forward as possible. After 5 seconds, the plane went from 460 knots to 432 knots. Total loss in speed was 28 knots, or 5.6 knots a second. This converts to 0.29 G. From the words of a real Marine Corps test pilot, who reported on the Harrier's decelerative abilities. In his own words, the airplane started decelerating at an alarming rate, the magnitude of which I could not determine because my nose was pressed against the gun sight. I hardly see how 5.6 knots a second, or 0.29 normal G-forces, could have caused a real fighter pilot to react this way. In fact, I actually have an accelerometer test that gives the exact amount of braking G the Harrier should have pulled from a 0.7 Mach start. We can see the house symbol representing 0.7 Mach, with nozzles out to 80 degrees. The solid line represents the aircraft's real result, the dashed line representing previous computer estimated results. The Harrier would have decelerated at around 1 G, or 19 knots a second. I have already attempted to make a report about this, using multiple sources of evidence. Other parts of this dev reply will be discussed, so just hold on for more. The response from the devs was as follows. Deflection angles more than 45 degrees above 300 knots and 0 degrees above 400 knots are not allowed according to manual. I don't know if he just did not bother to read the manual or if he just cannot read, but the manual says otherwise. Unlimited thrust vector control can be utilized all the way up until 400 knots. The 45-degree restriction starts at 400 knots and is allowed up until 470 knots at sea level. The second part of this that is mildly infuriating, Dev states as follows. In other hand, this is not possible to change acceleration from 6G to 7.5 G without change in AOA, as engine has not enough thrust to add 1 to 1.5 times the aircraft's weight. This is the Harrier he is talking about, an aircraft whose purpose was to generate more than its weight in thrust, to take off vertically. Lastly, he states, as said here previously, there is no room for 6G sustained turn rate at Mach 0.7. Who is this guy to tell anyone what this aircraft could or could not do? Especially when the establishments who say it can do these things are not only the people who test flew the aircraft, but also helped design them. We are talking about NASA and RE. Yet the dev knows better, apparently. Now to get back to the cool part, vectoring in forward flight. This page comes directly from the Sea Harrier FRS.1 Aircrew Manual. It states at 200 knots, 30 degrees of nozzle vector will generate 10 degrees a second in pitch rate. So, to go back to the first part of the video, when I was near 200 knots and vectoring, the plane should have been gaining serious AOA with only small amounts of nozzle angle. Normally high AOA like this is bad for a fighter, but the Harrier was special. As we can read here, only small amount of tailplane is needed to maintain the flight path. This is due to the Harrier having a blown wing effect. I also want to point out that this book mentions the exact test aircraft and report I have used. The same one Gaijin dismissed, simply due to them not wanting to believe it. This video only contained a discrepancy in vectoring in forward flight for the Harrier. There are still two more pressing issues that need to get sorted: flap deployment and performance, as mid-flap setting can actually increase the Harrier's available G by 0.5 G at 400 knots. And lastly, engine throttle setting and temps. These will come soon. Thanks for listening.